honor of meeting one of Hollywood's more prominent television writers with an endless list of credits. He was on the writing team of the award-winning show Everybody Loves Raymond from the beginning till the end, nine seasons. He has written for a small anonymous show called Seinfeld, Hot in Cleveland, Till Death, and many more. But we'll never get home, and we'll have to cancel all our things tomorrow if we go on with this. He is in Israel working on our remake of Everybody Loves Raymond, the Israeli version, which you're going to want to argue with us about. He's sort of like a missionary that's come to the jungle to tame the savages. Yeah, civilize the savages. This is Steve Scroven. And everybody here watches what you do there, and then we say, we'd like to do that too, something like that.
Yes.
And of course, then they say, yeah, right.
No money. Yes.
How did you get into this business?
Well, I started as a stand-up comedian over 30 years ago. I graduated from college, didn't know what I wanted to do. Club opened up in my hometown. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, in the Midwest, and quickly moved to New York and spent the 1980s in New York becoming a stand-up comedian. And then I moved out to LA because I got a job hosting a television show out in LA, which lasted 1 year. And then I was not renewed for that, and so I found myself in LA. I'd already moved my family there thinking the show would go on. And kicked around in LA doing more performing, trying to get acting jobs, more stand-up, commercial acting, stuff like that. And always was kind of a writer in my essence. And in the early 90s, 1992, a friend of mine who I'd known from New York, who had written sketches, and we'd written sketches together, he said, you should come to my apartment on Tuesdays. A bunch of us meet, and we have scripts. We're all writing spec scripts. It's just a sample script. You write it on speculation. It's a sample script that you write of a show that you don't give to that show. You give it to all the other shows, because if you give, let's say, if you want to write a Seinfeld spec, you never give it to Seinfeld necessarily, or Raymond spec. You would give your Raymond spec to Seinfeld and your Seinfeld spec to Raymond, because when you give a spec script to the show that that is the show, they know too much and they'll pick it apart too much. So you give it, you do the opposite. And so I started going to this group. It was like on Tuesday nights at his apartment. It was a bunch of people. We didn't know what we were doing because none of us were working, but it gave us a deadline if we wanted to have something done and read out loud by the group. So I started working on this Seinfeld spec idea in this group. We'd bring it in and people would read it, and we would give each other advice, but again, we didn't know what we were doing, but at least we were in the arena trying to, aspiring together. And I finished the spec script, and conveniently for me, luckily for me, I knew Larry David because he was a stand-up in New York too in the 80s. And I gave the script to him. I did the thing you're not supposed to do. So I gave the script to Larry, or actually my manager handed it to him, thinking that he might buy the idea, because he was known to buy ideas, but he liked to do all the writing. And instead, he called me up and he said, "Do you want a job?" And whenever I refer to Larry, I'll do his voice. I can't do anything like that. And he offered me and 3 other comedians that he knew from back in New York a job on the show. Not to write, but to be kind of a think tank. Because he wanted to write the episodes, because it was his vision, his voice. But he wanted us to come up with premises, with just ideas. Seinfeld was unique at the time for the fact that it would have 4 interlocking kind of stories, and that's kind of how that show evolved, which had only been done in drama before that. He kind of brought it to comedy just because his stories were slight. They weren't like deep stories. They were funny, and these 4 characters developed these very distinct personas that then they could write for, and then the fun was putting together the puzzle of how do you make them intersect? And sometimes they didn't; they just were parallel. But if you could make them all pay off in some way, that was kind of what he brought. He wrote in a very cinematic way, as opposed to a theatrical way. So that's kind of the innovation he brought. And for Raymond, which was very efficient actually, and they don't all work this way, but what would happen is somebody would come in with an idea. And usually it was, 99% of the time, it was something that happened to one of us. Argument with a spouse, some faux pas, some mishap. Usually it's something, as you all know as writers, where a story happens where something's going to go wrong, And you'd come in with that idea, and it may just be the real story, and then you may have some idea of where you think it could go as a script. And if Phil liked the idea, we would start discussing it in the room until we kind of beat out some basic broad strokes of the story. And we kind of knew what it was about. Because in Raymond especially, the stories always had to be about something. It couldn't just be jokes. There had to be some relationship issues, something there that you could hang your hat on. And then he would send you off to write an outline.
The person that pitched the idea.
Yes. It doesn't work that way in most other writers' rooms. A lot of writers' rooms, it's just like all the ideas go into a pile, and then they're assigned to different writers. And you may be working on, somebody may be working on your idea, and vice versa. But in Raymond, I think it was one of the reasons it was good is all the stories were very kind of personal. And you come in with an idea, and write the outline, which is a more detailed, about a 5 or 6 page detailed single-spaced outline with describing scenes. And you bring that in, all the other writers have read it, and then we brainstorm with Phil sort of moderating the debate. And people have notes, and Phil would have notes, and after that session, you either went back and rewrote the outline, or you went off to write the script.
Room, and I said, I think I have an idea for a show. I said, my wife always makes me late, and all the other people, yeah.
But it didn't cut across gender line. It was sometimes the husband was the late one, or so everybody had a story about lateness. Phil had a story. Phil's story was, my wife, we're at a party, and it's time to say goodbye, and I spent a half hour at the door waiting for her to do the goodbye tour. And we had this theme, because so I knew there was something there, but we didn't have a plot. I said, okay, so how do we express this in a plot? And my friend Aaron Shore, who Daniel knows, I was racking my brains about this. I said,
also a writer on the show, by the way.
Was a writer on the show, and I said, I just don't have a plot for this. I know it's a rich area, because everybody's got a story about it. Everybody's got a point of view about it. And he said, I had a friend whose father had a system called AIS, which stands for Ass in Seat. And he would set an AIS time for the family to be in the car. And if your ass was not in the seat by the appointed time, you were going to be left behind. That was the rule in his family. And he said it always worked until his friend had grown up and was actually a doctor and a well-respected adult, and there was some family thing. His father still set the AIS time and left him behind. And Aaron tells the story, and Phil goes, "That's the act break. Ray leaves Deborah." And I remember literally shuddering, going, "Oh my God, that's the greatest act break I've ever heard." It made me scared to think if I'd ever leave my wife. But I can do it in fiction and say, what if? But it really, for me, the stakes couldn't have been higher. So, and that's all I needed was the act break. I said, the setup will be easy. I just need to get to that where he leaves her, and then the consequences of that. And so after just that after the AIS setup, and then act break, that's all he needed. Okay, I'm going to go off and write this episode. And so we wrote an episode where Ray complains about her making him late all the time, and she doesn't realize it's a big deal. It's not her thing. But she promises the next thing they go to, she is going to be on time. He's going to set an AIS time. She promises he's going to make it.
because his father had set an AIS time, and that's what he remembers as a kid, and that we're going to institute this now. She says, okay, I will be there. And they're going to go to, he's a sports writer, so they're going to go to a big sports awards show, and they're all dressed up, and she's dressed up, and he's ready to go, and he gets in the car, and we cut to Deborah, who's just doing one last thing with a curling iron, and then gets her hair stuck in the curling iron. And she can't get out, and she doesn't know, what to do, and she's looking at her watch, and Ray's sitting there looking at his watch, and the AS time, she gets her, the hair on the curling iron, runs down the stairs, but Ray looks at his watch, drives off. She missed the time, and she gets to the door too late. And gets to this place, and a couple of his friends are there, and they say, "Where's Deborah?" "Well, she missed the AIS time." And the two guys go, "Holy shit! You did that? How could you? I would never do that to him." And they talk to him like this, and he realizes, "Oh fuck! I can never go home again."